Yolanda, welcome.
Happy to be here, Marcel.
Yolanda, I wanted to talk about plant breeders' rights a little bit, and more specifically on the Euroseeds view on IP. They have recently adopted a new Euroseeds view on IP, and in that view on IP, it mentions that PBR, plant breeders' rights, needs to be strengthened and improved. From your standpoint, where do you think we can further improve plant breeders' rights?
Thank you, Marcel. I read the IP policy of Euroseeds, and it's true that the content progress in improving, creating an effective system to enable, investment in breeding is at the heart of the reason why UPOV was established already in 1961. Before diving into the specifics that I saw in that policy, I would like to highlight that UPOV, as the intergovernmental organization that encompasses members from different parts of the world. Now we have 79 with the recent accession of Armenia. And as you know, it applies to 98 states because we have the European Union and the African Intellectual Property Organization. Mm-hmm. So we do see in different parts of the world how important it is to create this really, I would say, governance, an international setting of standards that enables international cooperation and harmonization. I saw in the policy that there are two key areas that were identified as continuous progress. One in relation to the balance between the farm-safe seed exception, but also ensuring, there is remuneration going back to the breeders. So there is a constant flow of new improved varieties going back to farmers and growers. Nowadays in UPOV, there are around 200,000 titles in force of plant breeders' rights. So that translates into these new varieties available for farmers and growers.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. That's a lot. 200,000 varieties available for farmers. Yeah, in force. Yeah. I read somewhere that we have, I think, 10 new varieties becoming available every day for farmers, counting the numbers in the CPVO database. So that's an enormous amount of work that the plant breeders are doing, of course. A very, let's say, recent addition to the plant breeders' toolbox are, of course, gene editing techniques. There's a lot of discussion from various angles. How do you see the relationship between plant breeders' rights and gene editing techniques?
This question is at the heart of a very important and recent work at UPOV. Marcel, we know each other for many years, and you know that one of the key, I would say, provisions in the 1991 Act or the UPOV Convention is the most recent version of the treaty. It was introduced the notion of essentially derived varieties. And already at that time, the ones who were the founders, the developers of this version of the convention, they were also looking into the development of new technologies and how to find a balance between, the work of breeders that may use some more traditional techniques like crossing, selection, and those who may use more modern technologies and how they could find a way to reach agreements when they may be mutual benefit into the different developments. And now with the gene editing and new breeding techniques, there was a need to even develop more explanations to clarify more certain notions of the convention, the notion of predominantly derived, that's already an indication, one of the elements of the definition. Then also the fact that the essentially derived varieties retains the essential characteristics of the initial protected variety. But then one element that was further clarification was provided is that if these differences between the varieties is as a result of the act of derivation, then these differences should be disregarded. So this is something that is at the heart of the new guidance that was just adopted in 2023, how to ensure that when there is some indication that one variety has been predominantly derived from another variety, there may be the situation where agreements can be reached. And we hope that the new guidance will provide further clarity So there is constant progress in breeding for the diversity of breeders. And again, back to the point, that will benefit the society with new varieties available for farmers and growers to meet the challenges of today with climate change, need to produce more with less, and also ensuring that there is, we reach, the key message that plant variety protection is an enabler, not only to get investment in breeding, but also to ensure that the varieties are commercialized in an effective way, and all the players in the value chain, they benefit because there is a transparent and fair framework to recover investment.
Wonderful. Yeah, I witnessed the revision of the explanatory note on EDVs, and one aspect that I particularly liked was the introduction of the notion of monoparentals. Because that is, of course, what we're talking about in gene editing. You have one parent and you make a change. And the new explanatory note mentions that, monoparentals are per se predominantly derived from the initial variety. And that I think that's a major step forward. Congratulations on that new explanatory note.
I will say it was one of the two words I like the most is working together. Because if the challenges are important, you need to bring, both the whole UPOV membership, but also the key stakeholders. And here the breeders also play a key role, also sharing their own practices, the trends, and why it was important to provide for the clarity. So I hope this space of working together is developed and strengthened.
Absolutely. Another aspect that I wanted to discuss with you, Yolanda, is that intellectual property, not only patents but also plant breeders' rights, is often under threat. Some organizations, for example, anti-IP NGOs, are putting pressure on IP, on plant breeders' rights. How can we turn that tide?
You know that part of my motivation to play an active role together with, the membership and the UPOV team in this area is how we can communicate better what we do, but not only within the circles of the plant variety protection, but even beyond, the IP circles. And for that, I realized that we need to focus on the why we're doing what we do and who is benefiting. And there we see that the key maybe strategy is to bring some of the meaningful examples of those who benefit, and also avoiding this perception that modern farmers' practices, modern varieties, and traditional farmers' practices and traditional varieties, they are one against each other, but it's the opposite. They really support each other. They complement each other. They are very important to ensure that there is continuous access to all types of varieties for further breeding. So conservation is key. Let me give you an example. I just came back from Argentina. I was there for one of the congresses of the Americas, and I had the chance to meet some of the key experts in Argentina. And there is one, I would say, example that illustrates what I just said. There is new varieties of ornamental plants that were developed by the National Institute of Argentina, INTA. And the development took place thanks to access to some wild plants through the access mechanism of the Convention of Biological Diversity that applies also in Argentina. So the provinces granted that access, but then there was an agreement that INTA will protect the new varieties they develop through access to this wild material. They will also commercialize those varieties, and through the licensing mechanisms, 50% of the royalties received were given back to the provinces that are the custodians of the genetic resources, so they could also, further promote the conservation programs. So this is another example of a win-win situation how plant breeders' rights, but also conservation are key, and they can complement each other.
Wonderful. Very happy to hear that. Thank you so much, Yolanda.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Marcel.